Um, this is the way it works, and it took me a long time to really realize that it was possible to live a life that didn't suck. And I'm glad I eventually did. Eventually, I found out that I can make choices for myself. And that's a really powerful thing. All my life, I would make choices for what I thought other people wanted of me. This worthless geek who everyone beat up. And the first choice I really made for myself was to quit television. And I'm not saying to anyone else quit television, but that's just my story in my life. When I quit TV, I suddenly had tons of time and energy that was free. And it was scary as hell, because my life sucked. And I didn't really realize that it didn't suck so bad, but it felt like it sucked. And all of the things that I was pushing away by watching TV started coming up, and I had to deal with it. But in that process, I found that there were things about life that I didn't hate. And when I started realizing that, I started looking for things that I actually liked. And I found I actually have been doing things that I like, because I've been playing in my basement, my parents' basement, and just twiddling with solder irons and doing radio and all this other stuff. And when I started getting to that, I do what are things which harkened into my other addictions, which were drugs, but I made an electronic bong. And that was a hit for all these kids in high school. And that was kind of fun to be the center of attention for once, positively, rather than like all these kids beating me up and yelling at me. So once I started seeing that, there might be actually things that I love to do, and it turns out there are. And that led me to all sorts of things. I learned that I love volunteering. I love helping other people do stuff. Geek stuff for sure. I do computer recycling and give it away to nonprofit groups. And I found that being athletic and active didn't mean that I had to be beaten up in gym class. And inventing is certainly something that I love to do. And if we skip ahead a lot of years, I can talk about inventing, which I've invented a lot of things, usually for other companies, and I've invented a few things for me, but TV Be Gone is really the first thing that I've done for me that I really put out into the world. And I didn't know it was going to be so popular. If I had known, I probably would have flipped out and ran away, because I'm an introverted geek. But it turns out it's tons of fun. And TV Be Gone is a result of TVs popping up everywhere in public places, and as you can probably tell, I hate television. So I didn't really want to be subjected to television everywhere I went. In the US, it's way worse than here. It's bad here, but it's way worse in the US. There's TVs pointing everywhere, and now there's those huge fucking screen wall-size things. Where can we rest our eyes without being marketed to? But this has been going on for a long time. It was 13 years ago that I thought of the idea of TV Be Gone, because we were sitting, me and my friends, who I hadn't seen in a long time, we agreed to get together in a restaurant. It happened to be a restaurant that put a TV in the corner, just one. The sound was off, and yet we couldn't pay attention to each other because that thing kept distracting all of us, not just me. We weren't there for the TV, we were there to talk to each other, but we kept watching the TV. What's this about? So we started talking about why is it that we can't pay attention to each other just because that stupid thing is on. And that's when I came up with the idea. Wouldn't it be cool if we could turn those things off anywhere you went? Sorry. Yeah, so let me get rid of her. I have the power. But so do you. We all have the choice. So inventing, just a little teeny bit on inventing, it's a three-step process. You have to have a problem, and then you have an idea to solve it, and then you implement it. A lot of people come up with ideas, or they gripe about problems, but a lot of people don't make the time in their life to put it out in the world. I've gotten emails from so many people who say they've invented something, and just seeing someone else put it out in the world encourages them to do it. And they say, like me, it took me 13 years to get TV Be Gone in the world from that time in the restaurant where I had the idea. It's not always easy to make the time and energy in our busy lives to do what we really know we want to do. So the problem for me, TVs in public places. The idea to solve the remote control TV Be Gone and implementation, it's my TV Be Gone, which I always have with me. Because unfortunately, you never know when you'll need it to have that choice. So it took me a year and a half to make TV Be Gone once I decided to do it. And I made a conscious choice in my life to quit doing all of this work. I've been a consultant most of my life, and it's been pretty cush. You know, I work like 6 weeks to 3 months a year, and it pays really well being a geek in our culture lately, so I don't have to work the rest of the year. But I decided, you know, I don't really want to work on these things which are just kind of neat. I want to work on stuff that I love. What would life be like that? I didn't know, so I figured I would just try it. And it gave me the time to do TV Be Gone. And this is the schematic for it. I don't know. Should I go into the geeky aspects, like how it works? Yeah? Okay. So it's conceptually extremely easy. Although it took me a year and a half to actually put it together because there are a lot of gotchas along the way, but conceptually it's extremely easy. There's just one microcontroller, which is the yellow rectangle in the middle, and there's a push button. When the micro sees the push button, it goes through a database in its ROM and transmits every code in the database out of the infrared emitter, which is Q1. Oh yeah, another cool device. Don't try this with airplanes. Okay, so that is the driver and that's the emitter, and it's just a standard infrared emitter that is in many remote controls. I actually chose a contract manufacturer in Hong Kong after searching for one which wasn't easy, that was good to its employees, that paid them a decent wage so they could make a living, and that was good to the environment, that was high quality, and gave me a good price. There aren't many of these in the world, but I happened to find one, and it happens to be the largest manufacturer of remote controls in the world. So it's only appropriate that they make TV Be Gone as well. So I asked them, what emitter should I use? They don't publish this stuff on the web. I mean, you look for remote control infrared emitters, and you really don't get the one to use. It turns out this is the one they use in almost all of their remote controls. It's really powerful. It's got a 30-degree angle, which is fairly wide, a lot of bright light going in that beam. You can use just about any other one, and it'll work, but this one's kind of nice. I have a visible LED here, just so when it's on, you can tell that something's happening. And this is a ceramic resonator at 8 megahertz, which is this Zilog chip that I chose to use. Zilog I chose not because it's necessarily the best. It's really good. It's a powerful little chip. It has timers built in that are specifically designed for remote control devices. And so it seemed like a good choice, and I knew Zilog because I'd done a bunch of projects with it, and I had the development environment. You could do it with so many other ones, though. One cool thing I found out with Zilog, though, after I spent a year and a half collecting all of the data from universal remote controls that I bought, like I go to these big electronic stores, like around here it's Conrad or Saturn or whatever, they sell universal remote controls. I bought a ton of those, created my own data acquisition system because a logic analyzer was too expensive. And just recorded all of the power codes for every remote or every TV that were programmed into those universals. So I spent a year and a half doing that, and then I found out that Zilog has their own database fully debugged. And I'd become friends with all of the engineers in the remote control department, so they just gave me a license for theirs. And it's fun, you know, working on something quirky because these applications engineers at these corporations, they're kind of bored. They're doing the same thing over and over, and even if it's kind of a different project, it's still kind of the same technology. They were really thrilled to have something way weird. So I became friends with all of them, and they do favors. It's, you know, social engineering, I guess, but just more of you're friendly to people, people are friendly back. Yeah, anyways, this is the board, the back side and the front side. I had to make a lot of engineering trade-offs, as you have to do with all projects. Just picking the emitter was a good trade-off, because do I want to have a wide beam that you don't have to aim as well, but that means it's less energy of light in every direction you point, which means the range is shorter? Or a more narrow beam where there's a lot more energy where you're pointing it, but you have to be more accurate? And I don't know if I made the right choice, but it seems to work, fairly good. Another one is with batteries. I use these coin cells. They're about the size of a euro, a little thinner though, to power. This one powers the microcontroller, which is there. This one powers the infrared emitter and the visible light, which is here. And the trade-off with that is they're small, so you can have a thing that fits on a keychain. The disadvantage is they don't put out as much power as, say, AAA batteries. And after this, I'll do another workshop like I did yesterday by the Fubud booth, where I can show you all how to make your TV on even more powerful. So if you want to do that, check it out downstairs after this. So anyways, there's some trade-offs. There were a few others too. One thing I did, which was a mistake, the microcontroller has built-in pull-up resistors, and it turns out that the pull-up resistor is a lot lower resistance than I'd hoped. And the way I tell the TV Be Gone to be North American or European, because I have a database for each, because there's so many different TVs in different parts of the world, I didn't want to have just one database to take way too long. I have a jumper here labeled R5, that's this one. If a jumper is in there, then it's European. Take the jumper out, it's North American. If it's European, the jumper's there, and it's got a constant slow trickle through the kind of low pull-up resistor off of this battery. So 12 months, these batteries go dead, which is why the European ones, I give away batteries with each one, replacement batteries. That was a fuck-up. But, there's so many details, even with a simple project like this, and it was just me. I didn't have a committee to look it over. I have a bunch of friends, but I'm the only geek, a hardware geek. So, I can say just a little bit about remote control codes. There's zillions of ways that manufacturers have figured out how to do remote control codes, and RC5 is the most popular, invented by Philips. What they do is they pulse infrared light very quickly when they want an on, and then when they want it off, they just have nothing. And how you interpret a 1 bit is to have pulsed on for a while, and then off for this length. Pulsed on for the same amount of time as before, and then off for half the length. That's a 0 bit. So this here is a 1 bit. This here is a 0 bit. And you can have as many bits as you like or as little, and different companies use different number of bits in their codes. Some of them, rather than having the off time change, they have the on time change. This might be 40 kilohertz on time, it might be 80, or it might have no carrier frequency, as it's called. And there's so many different ways of doing it, which makes making universal remote controls very, very challenging. Another thing that's important for TV Be Gone, but not so much for other universal remote controls, is that I don't want any two codes working on in my sequence on the same TVs, because if I have one code which is similar but kind of different from another one code in the sequence turns it on, the next, or turns it off. Somewhere later it turns it back on, and of course that's undesirable. So, yeah, anyways, I could go on at any of these things for too long. You can ask questions afterwards. So, a year and a half later, I actually have TV Be Gone. And I just want to say, when I made TV Be Gone, I just really wanted one for me. I wasn't thinking of making a product, but I'd tell friends, and of course they wanted them, they'd tell their friends, and it turns out they wanted them, and they'd tell their friends, and it turns out they wanted them, and suddenly there's all these people I don't know telling me, when are you going to have that thing? So I figured I had to make a bunch